I used to believe the suburbs were safe because of how quiet they always seemed. Rows of trimmed lawns, motionless wind chimes, smiling neighbors who only waved from a distance. After everything that happened, I have come to understand that silence is not always peaceful. Sometimes it means something is listening. I moved into the neighborhood in late October, just before the trees dropped their last leaves. The house was older but well kept, part of a homeowners association that prided itself on order. I liked that. I had been through chaos, messy roommates, loud streets, constant siren sound. I craved control. The HOA rules were thick, printed in a manual that weighed more than my cat. No paint colors outside a certain palette, no lawn decorations beyond seasonal flags, and no outdoor music above 40 decibels. It seemed excessive, but I assumed that was the price of peace. The first few weeks were uneventful. I met a few neighbors during walks with my cat Mitten, who enjoyed riding in a little mesh backpack. They all smiled, some nodded, but none really talked. It was as if every conversation had to be brief and rehearsed. The HOA newsletters came every Monday, always on time, always cheerful. There were photos of well-kept lawns and happy kids drawing chalk rainbows. But I noticed something odd there. Were never photos taken at night. Not during Halloween, not during community events, not even Christmas. At first I thought it was just a stylistic thing. Then I noticed my next-door neighbor, Mr. Harris, removed his porch lights every night after sunset. He unscrewed the bulbs and sat inside in the dark. I laughed about it to my sister over the phone. He must be old-fashioned, I said. Maybe he is trying to save on his electric bill. A few days after Halloween, I sat on my porch just before dusk with a glass of wine and some soft jazz playing from my phone. The air was crisp, and the breeze carried the faint smell of burning leaves. I was barely 10 minutes into the music when I noticed a shape across the street. A woman I had seen walking her dog was just standing still on her lawn, staring in my direction. Her dog sat beside her, unmoving. She did not wave. She just watched me. I turned the music off and went inside, brushing it off as strange timing. Maybe she had bad eyesight. Maybe she thought I was someone else. The next morning, a letter was pushed under my door. No envelope, just a sheet of paper with neat, perfect handwriting. It read, "You have violated the silence clause. Refrain from further disruptions after sundown." That was it. No name, no signature. I checked the HOA manual, flipping through every single page, and found nothing about a silence clause. I took the letter to the HOA office at the community center. The receptionist was a man in his late 60s, kind eyes and trembling hands. When I mentioned the letter, his smile tightened like it had been sewn into his skin. "We do not write warnings by hand," he said softly. "All communication is issued officially." I asked again about the silence clause. He paused, then shook his head. "There is no such rule." I left feeling more confused than scared. Maybe someone was messing with me, some bored neighbor who did not like jazz. Still, I stopped playing music outside, just in case. That night, Mitten did not come when I called her in. She had been sunbathing in the yard earlier, sleeping under the hydrangea bush. I walked the property twice, shaking her treat jar, whispering her name into the wind. No trace, no fur, no collar, no sound. It was like she had vanished in the middle of the yard. The next day, I knocked on a few doors asking about her. Most neighbors just shook their heads quickly and retreated back inside. One woman, pale and wide-eyed, leaned in close and whispered, "You should not have played music." I felt my stomach drop. I asked her what she meant, but she only closed the door. That evening, I ordered a motion-detecting camera set, 4 pieces. I installed them around my house, one facing the front porch, one at the side yard, one near the back gate, and one near Mitten's favorite spot, under the bush. I watched the feeds from my phone, constantly refreshing them. Nothing happened the first night, or the second, but on the third night, at exactly 3 a.m., the alerts went off. Movement detected on all 4 cameras. When I opened the footage, my hands began to shake. They were standing there, 8 people, dressed in black HOA uniforms, faces hidden behind white masks with blank expressions. One stood at each side of my property, facing the house, not moving. They did not knock. They did not speak. They just stood there, perfectly still, for 13 minutes. Then, one by one, they turned and walked away. I barely slept after that. I left the lights on all night. I locked the doors twice, but no one came back the next night. I went to the HOA office again the following morning. The receptionist was gone. The room was locked. A handwritten sign taped to the door said, "Closed due to structural concerns." I visited the local library that afternoon and looked up the neighborhood history. The HOA was formed in 1989 by a group called the Order of Preservation. It was not a government body. It was a private group that bought 21 of the 30 houses during a foreclosure crisis. The original members all lived on the same street. None of them had moved since. I dug deeper, found an archived newspaper article from 1993. Local subdivision saves itself from collapse. The story mentioned rising crime, then sudden improvements overnight. Some said there was no mention of what changed, only that the neighborhood had become quieter, safer, and more obedient. One name stood out, Harold Wicks. He was listed as the president of the order. I found his house corner lot, tall hedges, rusted mailbox. I knocked. No answer. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. The yard was covered in small, circular holes, like something had been burrowing up from underground. That night, I heard scratching beneath my floor, not in the walls, below the house. It was faint at first, like nails dragging along a wood beam. I stayed frozen in bed, counting the seconds between each scrape. I called pest control the next day. They found nothing, said the crawl space was dry, clean, and sealed. No signs of rats or raccoons. I did not believe them. I started asking more questions around the neighborhood. Most people avoided me, but one man, Mr. Redfield, a retiree with glassy eyes and a stiff limp, invited me in. He told me the silence was not about noise control. It was a ritual, a deal made by the original HOA members to keep something asleep, something that lived beneath the development. It hates sound, he said, voice barely above a whisper. It hears everything, vibration, rhythm. It stirs when it senses music. I asked what happened if it woke up. He only said, "We lose someone." I asked if that was what had taken Mitten. He nodded, once. I left feeling like I had been told a bedtime story meant to frighten children. But the next night, I heard the scratching again, louder, closer. Then came the knocking, not on my door. Underneath it, a heavy thud, like something hitting the floorboards from beneath. I grabbed my phone and opened the cameras. Nothing. But then, the motion alert chimed again. A single figure stood at the back gate, masked, unmoving. I watched as it tilted its head, listening. Then it vanished, just stepped out of frame. I did not see it leave. The last straw was the dream. If it was a dream, I saw Mitten. Her eyes were pale, her fur stained with dirt. She stood in my bedroom doorway and hissed, but there was no sound. Her mouth moved, but nothing came out. Behind her, the floor opened like a mouth. A hole formed in the wood, wide and wet and breathing. Something moved inside it, something huge and coiled. When I woke, the floor where she had stood was cold, damp. I left the next day, packed only what I could carry. As I drove out, I saw the masked figures again standing on different lawns now, watching silently. One held a sign, "Silence is safety." I never looked back. I found a place far from cities, far from HOAs. But sometimes, when the wind dies and the world goes still, I think I hear scratching beneath the floor, just faint enough to wonder if I imagined it, just loud enough to know I did not. I always believed that the scariest thing in life was the unknown. But lately I have come to realize that it is the things we think we understand that can twist into nightmares without warning. It started with a fine. Just a simple letter slipped under my door in a neat white envelope, marked with the cold black letters of the HOA. It said I had violated the neighborhood trash policy. Something about bins being left out past the allowed hours. I live in Unit 6. The citation was clearly for Unit 7. The trouble was, there is no Unit 7. There never has been. I have lived here for 5 years. I know every house on this cul-de-sac. It goes from Unit 1 to Unit 6. No skips, no spaces. Just 6 neat little homes wrapped around a half-moon street with manicured lawns and stiff, quiet neighbors who wave too politely and talk too little. At first, I thought it was just a clerical error. I called the HOA and told them they must have gotten the wrong number. The woman on the other end of the phone, cheerful and flat, insisted it was correct. Unit 7, she said, right between Unit 6 and Unit 8. I told her there was no Unit 8 either. The neighborhood ends at my driveway. After that, it is just a patch of empty woods. She paused like she was confused, then said, "You must be mistaken. Please check again." Then she hung up. I stood outside that evening, staring at the gap beside my house, the one that had always been just trees and dirt. I even walked out to it, crunching over the dead leaves and branches. There was no sign a house had ever been there. No foundation, no mailbox, no driveway, just forest. The next month, another letter came. Same citation, trash bin left out past 10 p.m. Same fine, same address, Unit 7. This time there were photos. I laughed when I saw them. They showed a house. Not mine, not anyone's. A generic-looking 2-story home with gray siding, black shutters, and a blue recycling bin sitting stubbornly at the curb. I turned the photo over, expecting some kind of watermark or sign that it was a stock image. But there was nothing, just the printed date, taken 3 days earlier. I felt a cold twist in my gut and went outside again. Same trees, same dirt, no house, nothing. I even walked further into the woods just to be sure. I was alone. But when I turned to go back, I swear I heard a faint creaking sound, like a door closing behind me. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the photo. Who had taken it? Where had they taken it? Was someone messing with me? The next day, I went to the HOA office. I had never been there in person. It was a small building tucked between a real estate office and a frozen yogurt place. The woman at the front desk was the same one I had spoken to on the phone. Her smile never touched her eyes. When I told her there was no Unit 7, she frowned slightly and tapped something into her computer. Unit 7 is active, she said. 2 residents, Harold and June Whitaker. They moved in last week. I stared at her. "There's no house there," I said. "It's woods." She turned her screen so I could see it. There was a digital image of the same gray house from the citation. "You must be confused," she said. I left feeling dizzy, like I had stepped into some alternate version of my own life. That night, Unit 7 appeared. I do not know how else to say it. I woke up to take the trash out around midnight, and when I looked next door, it was there, just standing quietly in the moonlight, like it had always been there. Gray siding, black shutters, blue bin, porch light on. I froze. I could not move. I must have stood there for 10 minutes just staring. Then I saw movement in the front window. A curtain twitched. A hand waved slowly. I backed away and went inside without taking the trash out. I did not sleep at all. When the sun came up, I ran outside. The house was still there. Solid. Real. I walked right up to it and touched the porch rail. It was cold and rough. I rang the doorbell. No answer. But I knew someone was watching. Over the next few days, I watched them. The old couple, Harold and June. They sat on the porch in matching chairs and waved every time I came outside. They never left the house. No mail came. No trash truck stopped. No lights turned on at night, except for that one yellow porch bulb. I asked my neighbors about it. Carol from Unit 5 blinked at me like she did not understand. "That lot's been empty since I moved in," she said. "Are you okay?" I asked the mailman. He scratched his head and said, "Only deliver to 6 houses here." But when I pointed at Unit 7, he just looked right through it, like it was not there. I started digging. I went to the county records office and asked about the history of the property next to mine. The clerk pulled out a dusty folder and flipped through it. "Oh," she said softly. "There used to be a Unit 7. She handed me a yellowed newspaper clipping. My hands shook as I read it. "Tragedy in Meadow Pines." The headline read, "House fire claims elderly couple." The address was Unit 7, Harold and June Whitaker. The article said the fire had started in the kitchen. Electrical fault. The bodies were found holding hands in the living room. They never made it out. That was in 1993. I asked the clerk what happened to the property. She frowned. "It was condemned. Never rebuilt." I asked if it was sold. "No," she said. "Technically, it is still under HOA management. Placeholder property, just to keep the street numbers tidy." I did not go home after that. I checked into a motel across town and stared at the ceiling for hours. I called my boss and said I was taking a few days off. That night, I dreamed of fire. I saw the house burning in the darkness, and 2 shapes watching me from the flames. When I woke up, I had 10 missed calls, all from unknown numbers. I deleted them without listening. On the 3rd day, I went back. I had to know. I had to see if it was still there. When I turned onto my street, Unit 7 was darker than usual. No porch light, no Harold, no June. The front door was open. I should have turned around. I walked up the steps and stepped inside. The house smelled like smoke and wet wood. The walls were gray, but the paint was peeling like skin. There was no furniture, no lights, just a long, narrow hallway with doors on either side. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. No one, but the front door had closed. I turned back and saw 2 figures standing at the end of the hall, pale, still, smiling. "You finally came," the man said. His voice was dry, hollow. The woman beside him nodded slowly. "You have our dues," my voice cracked. "What do you mean?" She tilted her head. "You have our number now. It must be paid. It is your turn." I stumbled backward, but the hallway kept stretching longer. The walls pressed in. I screamed, but no sound came out. I woke up on my front lawn. The sun was rising. My clothes smelled like smoke. My arms were scratched and dirty. I looked at Unit 7. It was gone. Trees, dirt, nothing else. I checked the HOA website. No mention of Unit 7. No fines, no records. It was like it had never been there. I tried to convince myself it was all a dream, a breakdown, stress. But every month since, on the same day, a letter arrives. No envelope, just a slip of paper under my door. The same message, in red ink. Trash bins must be placed at the curb by 9 p.m. Failure to comply will result in penalties. No return address, no signature, just a line at the bottom. Unit 7. I burn everyone, but they keep coming. Last week, I noticed something strange about my house number. The 6 on my mailbox is crooked. It looks like it used to be a 7. I tried pulling at it, and the metal bent easily, revealing a faint scorch mark underneath. I checked the foundation behind my backyard and found something half buried in the dirt. A melted doorknob. I think they moved the numbers after the fire. I think the HOA wanted to forget, but the ghosts never did. Every 30 years, they come back, and someone has to pay. This month, the letter said final notice. I think I know what that means. If you are reading this, do not ever trust the numbers on your street, and never ignore a find that is not yours, because the next house to appear might be next to you. They warned me when I moved into Willow Lane that the HOA was strict, but I had no idea just how strange things would get. As a single mother trying to rebuild after my divorce, I thought this neighborhood was perfect. It was quiet, clean, and the homes all looked the same in that oddly comforting way. My little boy Mason loved the playground down the street, and our neighbors smiled politely when we passed by. Everything felt safe, routine, almost too normal. The only thing that ever caused me trouble was the yard, or rather, what was not in the yard. The front of my house had nothing but plain grass when I moved in. I liked it that way. It was easy to mow and gave Mason space to play. But about a month after settling in, I received a letter from the HOA stating I was in violation of landscaping rules. The letter claimed I had planted non-compliant vegetation and needed to remove it or face fines. I was confused. There were no plants, just flat grass. I assumed it was some kind of clerical error and threw the letter away. A week later, I got another one, this time with a photo attached. It showed dark vines crawling over my lawn like tentacles, thorned and twisted, but the photo was dated from 2 nights before, and I had not seen anything like that. In fact, I had mowed the lawn that very morning. I checked the yard again, still plain, green, and empty. The fines kept coming. I called the HOA office to argue, but no one picked up. I left voicemails, sent emails, even drove to the address listed on the letterhead. The building was locked, lights off. A neighbor finally told me that the HOA president worked from home and rarely spoke in person. I felt like I was chasing shadows. Meanwhile, the letters became more aggressive. I was told that the vegetation was spreading, that it had wrapped around the base of my porch, that my neglect was endangering the neighborhood. I laughed at how ridiculous it sounded, until one morning I saw something strange. At the edge of my porch, poking through the crack between 2 steps, was a small black vine. It was thin, but sharp-looking, like it could slice skin if touched. I grabbed a shovel and dug around it, but it was shallow, barely rooted. I yanked it out and threw it away. But that night, I had trouble sleeping. Around midnight, I heard a noise. It was faint, like shoveling. I peeked out the window but saw nothing. The next morning, the yard looked untouched, except for one thing. There was a single thorned vine, planted dead center in the lawn. I mowed again, flattened it, and even poured boiling water on the spot. That night, I stayed up late. I made coffee, sat by the window with the lights off, and waited. At exactly 12:22, something moved in the yard. I leaned forward, heart thudding, and saw a figure. It was hunched over, pale, almost bone-white. It dug with its hands, slow and silent, pulling soil apart like it had done it for years. Its face never looked up. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. I stumbled back, grabbed Mason from his room, and locked us in the bathroom until morning. I installed a camera the next day, one of those motion-sensitive types. That night, the figure returned. The footage showed it appearing out of nowhere, crawling from the far edge of the yard on all fours. It did not walk like a person. It crept like an insect, jerky and wrong. Again, it dug in silence, and this time, it planted something, a lump of black mass that shimmered like wet leather. The next day, I found a thick vine with blood-red thorns stretching toward the porch. I called the police, showed them the footage. They said it must be a prank, someone in makeup. They would patrol the area, but there was nothing they could do without catching the person. They did not come back. That afternoon, the HOA president came to my door. His name was Mr. Halpern, a thin old man with a deep wrinkle between his eyebrows and fingers that shook even when he tried to keep them still. He asked if he could speak privately. I let him in. He did not sit. He stared at the floor the entire time. He told me there was something I needed to know. Decades ago, before the HOA even existed, a man named Arnold Fincher lived in my house. He was quiet, kept to himself. One spring, his wife vanished. Police searched everywhere, but Arnold claimed she left him. No one could prove otherwise. But the neighbors knew something was wrong. They said his yard started growing strange things after she disappeared. Vines, flowers that bled when touched, roots that screamed if pulled from the ground. Every spring, it happened again. The garden always came back, and each time someone tried to dig it up, the pale man appeared. I asked him who the figure was. He did not answer. He just said the vines were her, that no matter what we did, she returned. When the HOA was formed, they tried to remove the yard altogether, replace the soil, but each time they tried, someone went missing, and then the digger came to their homes, always at 12:22, always digging. No one knew what it wanted, only that it hated being disturbed, so the HOA stopped fighting it. They decided to fine the resident each year, hoping it would scare people enough to stay quiet. It was not about the rules, it was about fear. I asked why he was telling me this now. He looked up for the first time and said, "Because last night, the digger looked at the camera. After that, I did not sleep. I unplugged everything. The camera, the lights. I closed the blinds, boarded the windows. I kept Mason in my room, made up stories to keep him calm. But the vines kept growing, through the porch, through the cracks, even through the pipes. One morning, I turned on the tap, and something black and stringy came out before the water did. I ran outside and saw that the entire yard was now covered. There was no grass, only a thick, tangled mass of vines that hissed in the wind. I tried to leave, packed the car, buckled Mason in, but the engine would not start. The battery was drained. Every wire was chewed through, like something gnawed at them with metal teeth. I called a tow truck. No one came. I called every friend I had. The lines were silent. Even the mail stopped coming. I was trapped. I spent every night staring at the clock. And every night, at 12:22, the digging began. Then one night, it stopped. That was worse. The silence pressed into my ears like a scream held back too long. I crept outside, holding a flashlight in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. The vines had parted, forming a narrow trail. I followed it. My feet moved without me thinking. It led to the center of the yard. There, a hole had opened. Deep, dark. Something glinted at the bottom. I leaned in. The smell hit me first. Rot, wet dirt, old perfume. Then I saw her, a face, eyeless, mouth stitched shut with roots. She opened it anyway, and something inside whispered my name. I ran. I do not remember how I got back inside. The door slammed on its own. Mason screamed. I held him, sobbing, until the sun rose. The hole was gone by morning, but the vines remained. The HOA never fined me again. Mr. Halpern died 3 days later. They found him in his garden, not just dead, buried, upright, like someone planted him. A small black vine curled from his mouth like a tongue. No one said a word. His house sold a month later. A new family moved in, a young couple. No kids. I wanted to warn them, but I could not find the strength. I watched as they mowed the lawn, laughed in the driveway, waved to me with bright smiles. Yesterday, I saw a new letter in their mailbox. The envelope was pale yellow. The seal had the HOA stamp. I think spring has come again, and the garden never forgets.